The plot is driven by the struggles and the aspirations of ordinary people who sometimes find themselves drawn across some terrible lines. The relationship between Stride and Serena, who are sort of the heroes of the novels, is very much important to the growth of the series. And in many ways, at this point, they are guiding me, and more than I'm guiding them. For example, in my fourth book, Le Voyeur, that is a novel that is one of my own personal favorites, because it's a very emotional book, and it goes deep into the events in the past that influenced who Stride is and the man he became and the detective that he became. But because it deals with things from Stride's past and deals with the loss of his first wife, which takes place before the action of Jamais je ne reviendrai begins, it brings to the surface emotions that Stride has been repressing and dealing with for years, and it has an impact on his relationship with Serena. When I wrote my next novel after Le Voyeur, in the early chapters as I was developing that book, I needed to listen to Stride and Serena and let them tell me where their relationship was going. And some very significant things happened between them during the course of that book. I was concerned that some readers would think it was a departure from what had happened in the early books. And as I was in the process of writing that book, I got the proofs of Le Voyeur back, and I had the chance to reread that book. And I saw all of the stress lines in the relationship that were in Le Voyeur that I had not necessarily seen myself when I was writing the book, and yet all of those things had a chance to sort of emerge in my fifth book. So in some ways, they're taking me on this ride almost more than I'm taking them. So I don't know where it will end up, but I want it to feel like a real relationship to the reader, and a real relationship is going to have its highs and its lows, and its passions and its fights, and they'll have to guide me about what happens next. I do. In fact, the most recent two novels that I've written are standalones, and so I've given Stride a chance to take a hiatus, and I think after all the things I've put him through in the first 5 books, he's earned a holiday. But it's an interesting experience, because when I'm writing a standalone, I'm exploring all new characters from the beginning, and yet I can still feel Stride sort of standing by my shoulder and nudging me. He's still very much real. He's still very much a part of my creative process, and it makes me that much more interested in getting back to Stride and bringing him back onto the scene and telling his story. I'm trying to write books where the drama emerges out of the emotions and secrets and backgrounds of characters. I usually use an example from people from a long time ago in my past. I knew a woman in one of my earlier lives in the traditional workforce, and I met her for lunch one day, and I could tell that something was bothering her, and I discovered that, which I had not known, that 20 years earlier, her ex-husband had kidnapped their daughter, and she had not seen her daughter in all that time. And she had just rediscovered her, and they were going to be reunited that coming weekend. And I have always remembered that story, because it was such a lesson for me in the fact that all you have to do is scratch the surface with ordinary people, and you find these amazing stories coming out of triumph and tragedy and suffering and grace and striving. And what I'm really trying to do with my books is honor those kinds of stories, and let the stories of ordinary people and what's going on in their lives turn into drama in the course of my books. And so I've always I've always kept her in my head as I've written my novels, because I want to not write stories where there are superheroes and supervillains, but instead write stories where the plot is driven by the struggles and the aspirations of ordinary people who sometimes find themselves drawn across some terrible lines.